Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Valtalia, my dear friend, who invited me here, and for the Theosophical Society for opening your space to us. And sorry we blew out your walls. And um, obviously, I think I'm Lori Lipton. Last time I checked. Um, and I'm here to talk about the afterlife. That is what I was asked to speak about. And I work as or show up in the world as a shamanic medium. And so let me just say a little bit about what that means, because it can be not always easy to understand what that refers to, right? So why do I use that phrase? And I'm not real comfortable with titles. Like, just don't mean a whole lot to me, but they can be helpful in understanding the way that I live and experience reality. And so why I use the term shamanic medium? The term shaman derives from the Tungus tribe in Siberia. Most people think of the word shaman as a Native American term, and it is not. It comes from Siberia, and it means a person who can see in the dark through their heart, or a person who walks in two worlds and does it with some level of competency. Use that, some level of competency, right? So that there's some level of mastery. We know the difference between what it's like when you're not in this world and you're experiencing what we might call non-ordinary reality without competency, right? And so to be a shaman means that you have some competency in it. You understand what's happening, and you bring that information in a way that serves healing for your community. So that's my mission. That's what I believe that I'm here for. That's the way that I show up on a daily basis, that each and every interaction for me is about serving the highest good of life, the best that I know how, by bringing through messages of love, light, and truth from what I refer to as non-ordinary reality. And the term medium refers to the ability to collaborate effectively with spirit and to bring messages from spirit that are evidence-based and that truly prove that there's eternal life, and then serve healing. For me, I'm focused on the healing. So I'm here to talk about the afterlife, and it's interesting because it's what I do all day long. And the way that I'm going to share with you is based on my experience. Because for me, I was certainly raised in a religion, and there wasn't a whole lot of talk about the afterlife in my religion. And the religion that I was raised in was Judaism. And there's not a lot of focus on the afterlife in that particular religion. If there's anybody in here that knows what I'm talking about, it's all about how you live this life. Can you do something good with it, right? Right. So this is what I grew up with, and I grew up with scientists as parents. Both my father was a physicist, my mother was a chemistry major, ended up getting a PhD in sociology, and she was a professor at Wayne Medical School. So both my parents were intellectual, science-related, science-referenced individuals who did not believe in an afterlife, did not believe in anything that has to do with non-ordinary reality. And guess who their daughter is? Right? So, hello. You know? Right? So I'm in awe of that and fascinated by it and humbled by it. So it allowed me to have an open mind in many ways. Allow me to question my reality. And I'm still questioning it. So everything that I'm going to share with you, I'm going to say to you from this perspective. This is what I understand at my level of consciousness thus far. This is not me saying this is fact. This is the way it is. This is something I'm curious about. I remain curious about. I'm interested and intrigued by what spirit is saying to me and those that I'm serving. And I'll share with you all that insight that I have, and then open the floor for questions if we have time for that, if that makes sense. So there's a quote that I saw, and it says, it's from John Green, who wrote the book that later became a movie, The Fault in Our Stars. And the quote is that I believe humans have souls, and I believe in the conversation of souls. And I would say, I don't believe in that. I live it. It's not a belief for me. It's something that I experience and I'm constantly in wonderment about. So far what I've understood is that before we come in, well, let me back up. We are all multidimensional beings. We are all essence, spirit, you might call it, or a soul that's having a physical experience for a reason, for a purpose. We chose to come into our body. We chose to come in to learn, to evolve, and to serve. And everybody has a purpose for doing that. And everybody is a soul in a physical body. And we're in this auspicious time on the planet because right now we're in a time of expansion of light. There's an awakening, there's a quickening that's happening, that people are feeling more and more interested in what does it actually mean to be a soul in a body? And is it possible for me to have direct experience versus what my religion, what others are telling me? Can I know what that means? Can I touch spirit? Can I touch the divine in myself or beyond me directly? And then know it. That's where we are right now in our evolution as a human species. So we come in with this purpose. And so far, it's my understanding that every soul that comes into a body knows why it came in and will do everything, that soul will do everything it can to get your attention to help you fulfill its mission. And its mission can be about learning lessons. It can be about experiencing the bliss of the material world. It can be about transcending the material world. We can have different kinds of missions, but ultimately, we're all learning what it means to be a soul in a physical body and to expand our capacity for love in this body. So we choose before we come in some of the main themes of our life, and we choose when we're going to pass, when we're going to what we call die. I don't usually refer to that word too much, even though it is like a death. The physical body dies, the spirit does not. So we choose usually 3 to 5 exits before we arrive in our body. That means 3 to 5 times that we can actually pass from this world into afterlife without creating any karma or adverse effects on life. Before we leave, there's about a 7-year process that the soul starts to leave this world and starts to shift into non-ordinary reality or spirit. So, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So I'm going to talk about the ideal. The ideal is that you die peacefully or relatively peacefully and you transition, and I'm going to describe that process first. So that's the ideal, right? That we'd all like to have, that we die in our sleep or we die with our loved ones around us. We have some sense of when we're going to go. And we've made some peace with ourselves. When that process happens, we have guardian spirits, helping spirits, and angels that work with us throughout our lifetime. Every single person on the planet, regardless of your faith, regardless of your religious orientation, is supported by at least one helping spirit, and most of us have more. And very often we have at least 3. From a Native American perspective, and that's a very broad brush that I just painted with, you usually have 3. And they're usually in the form of animals. I see them in all forms, angels and teachers. Sometimes they're loved ones. Most of the time, we have a divine being that I understand as angelic, which means that that attunement of that soul is completely resonant with divine light and has no ego. So at the time that you die, when you draw your last breath, an angel comes to escort your soul and help you make sense of being in non-physical reality. And there's a period of time, and I am going to talk about time in the linear context, but let me explain to you, what I'm trying to explain to you is not linear. I'm talking about a multi-dimensional, non-ordinary experience. I'm going to try my best to bring it into linear context. Does that make sense? So for about the first 3 to 10 days, that soul is sort of making peace with understanding that they're actually deceased, that they've left their body, that they're safe, that there's actually a loved one with them, usually some kind of angel and or maybe someone that was very dear to them that's also in spirit. And they usually go to their funeral. They usually are interested to, yeah, isn't that funny? Right? So like at my own father's funeral, who didn't believe in this, by the way, my own father's funeral, I had written a eulogy. You know, I was planning to do it, and I was too wrecked. I was too emotional. I was like, no, can't do it. Turn to my mother. I'm like, I'm not going to do it. My father walks up to me, and he goes, get up there. I was like, all right. Yes, that's the last time you're going to boss me around. Right. So I felt all of a sudden this surge of courage and the ability to speak. I love my dad. He's an amazing guy. So, so that's usually the first 10 days. And from a shamanic medium's perspective, or maybe I should just say from this perspective, mine, I will not contact spirit during that time. I will not seek them out. If somebody wants to come to me for a reading, I will not do it. I do not feel that's a good call because they are really still negotiating about being tied to the earth or ascending into the light. That doesn't mean they're struggling necessarily. It just means this is a process of shifting. And it's not necessarily in the highest good, chills, to make contact with the spirit at that time in an ideal setting. So then after that period, then the spirit starts to let go, or the soul starts to let go. And it starts to move upward or ascend toward what we might call or refer to as the light. Some people might call it the higher astral or the lower upper world. I'm happy to explain more about that in a moment, but let's just think of it as a divine realm, as a very loving realm, as an ability to connect with that which is greater than what we experience on earth as love. Okay? And so for the first 10 months, after that first week, for the first 10 months, that soul goes through a process of 3 phases. And the first phase is a reunion. And you get to see your loved ones who are in spirit. You get to reunite with the loved ones that you knew in this lifetime. And the first phase of that reunion is a happy reunion. It's like, oh my gosh, you know, there's mom, there's dad, there's my dog, there's my uncle, there's my friends. You'll see people you forgot about. You'll see people that you want to see. And it's a really comfortable, peaceful, loving time and joyful reunions. And then there's a process of reunion with the people you may not want to see. You're like, wait, what? You got a ticket to this party? You know, how'd you get in? You know, right? So then you got to kind of deal with that. And there's a period of connecting with those souls in a meaningful way, because then you enter the next phase of your life. And again, I'm telling you this in a linear way. This is not linear in the afterlife. You enter life review. And life review is a period of time where you review exactly like what you would think, your life, your last physical life. And you review it in a way that's multi-dimensional. So you are experiencing your whole life in sort of like a movie, but with all full sensory experience. Does that make sense when I say it like that? In other words, you feel it, you see it, you know it, you understand it, you hear it, you get all the senses are engaged during that process. And what is the point of this life review? This life review is happening in a realm known as the Akashic realm, where you are surrounded by benevolent helping guides, master guides. And these guides hold no judgment of your choices. None, zip, zero, nada. This is not like a courtroom scene where you're like, you know, did you love or did you pass the cookies that day? You know, it's nothing like that. It is absolutely, were you able to choose love? How well were you able to love? And where did you withhold love? And not because you're being judged for it, you're beginning to understand the limitations of what it means to be love in a human form. Does that make sense when I say it like that? So it's love with an ego. So without the ego, love is unconditional. It's just easy. With the ego, it becomes conditional, right? All of a sudden, we're not good enough, you're not good enough, and we don't measure up somewhere somehow. But that's not true love, right? That's the human conditional love. So you're doing this review about the way you loved. And love takes on many different dynamics, many different forms, because it includes, you know, did I take that risk? Could I give myself permission to have some joy? Could I connect or forgive my father or mother or friend or whomever who hurt me? Can I hold that much compassion for what seems unlovable? Is it possible? Am I capable of doing that? And so what you're doing is you're spending time in this process. And in that experience, you're beginning to understand yourself at a whole new level and with a great deal of support. This process can happen quickly. And I use that term, you know, like I'm kind of laughing because it's like non-ordinary reality is where you are. Like, I don't know what quick means. So it can happen quickly or it can take very long time. And that's really how spirit describes it to me. I'm still in life review. Like I've met people who are in spirit that are 6, 7 years after their past telling me that they're still in life review. And I've met people in spirit who said like, oh yeah, that was fast. It was quick for me. Now, what's interesting to me and what piqued my interest about this whole process was how this whole dance began. Because before I was working or showing up or serving as a shamanic medium, I worked in the corporate world, believe it or not. Right? And I had this, you know, and I had left the corporate world and I had decided to go back to school to get my PhD in psychology. And I had this incredible experience. I was on the treadmill And by this point in my life, I was already used to spirit communicating with me. So let me just make that as a point. I think it's important. But not the spirit of loved ones. It was angels. I could see angels. Chills. Angels had saved my life. Angels are the reason I am here. And I was 27 years old, and I was in my 20s, and I had so much trauma in my life. I was making good progress at drinking almost all the alcohol in southeastern Michigan. So in case you were wondering why there was a shortage, that was me. And I was slowly killing myself. Maybe not that slow. I was in trouble. I was in pain. And I prayed to God, if you're there, will you help me? If you exist, will you help me? And I saw a vortex show up, a golden light with like thousands of angels in it. And they filled me with so much love. And all I heard was, we're here. We love you. Put down the drink, Lori. You have a disease. If you do what we say, we will help you. And you will thrive. Chills. And so they led me into recovery. I'm grateful to say that was, well, I was in my 20s, so it was only about 2 years ago. So and it's been a few decades. And by the grace of God, I'm sober today. So, and they saved my life. They helped me find a new way. And I learned in that program to listen to that which was greater than my mind. You know what, in AA, they call it a higher power. Well, for me, being the curious person I am, I was like, well, what is a higher power? How would I even know what that is, And so I made it my mission to listen and discover that. And I could see these angels, and I could hear them, and I could see their love and their light and feel it. And so one day, I was about to go to graduate school. I had a 3-year-old. She was playing next to me. And I heard a voice tell me to turn on the TV. And I'm always for divine guidance that tells me to watch TV. I'm like a big fan of that. And so I turn on the TV, and I hear, turn on this channel. I turn it on that channel. It happened to be the sci-fi channel, which is interesting. And on the TV was a man named John Edward. And John Edward was a medium. I didn't really know him, but I think I had seen him before. I didn't know. And I could see who he was talking to and the spirits in the audience. And I heard, just like you, Lori. I was like, what's up with that? What are you talking about? And then all of a sudden, I saw this light in front of me, and this angel come down, touch my forehead, fill me with light, and tell me, Thomas needs to speak to his mother, Joy. And I was like, okay. I'm on the treadmill, just walking. I'm like, who's Thomas? Who's Joy? And so I was like, what do I do with this? And then I got a vision of a woman that I knew in my daughter's play group, one of the moms. And then I felt this strong push to act. And I made a phone call to that woman. And I said, hi, this is Lori. No, I'm not drinking. This is the strangest phone call of my life. I didn't know her very well. And I asked her, I just said, I do not want to disturb anybody. I do not want to cause any harm to anybody. But do you happen to know a young boy, a 15-year-old boy that died of a heart attack that was named Thomas? And she said, oh my God, yeah, I do. And I says, his mother, do you know his mother named Joy? And she said, yeah, that's my cousin. Chills. And I said, oh shit. And she said, I hope it's okay to swear in here. And she said, how do you know this? And I said, well, an angel just touched my forehead while I was on the treadmill. was like, what do you do with that? Right. So that made me wonder. And long story short is that Joy ended up calling me a few days later, and I did the first reading, if you want to call it that, of my life, that first communication of my life. She called me. Thomas stood in front of me, talked to me, and I shared messages from Thomas to his mother. And at the end of that session, as she was crying, she said, like, what do I do? How do I know this is Thomas? And I'm like, Thomas, how did she, after I just spoke to her about for, an hour, she still wonders. And Thomas had her walk down the hall, said, Mom, you're sitting on a gray chair. And she was. And he said, get up, walk down the hall, go to the third door, go in the third door, go to the second bookshelf, pull out the fourth book. I mean, literally, it was that specific. Open it up, turn it to page 42. This is what it says on the page. And she squealed, and so did I. And I fell to my knees and said, after I hung up, crying, and said, okay, God, what would you have me do with this? What would you have me do with this? Like, what is this? This isn't my life plan. I wasn't planning on this at all. What is this? And that's when I heard, do readings, show up, serve. So then I was curious, why would a boy need to speak to his mother? Why did this 15-year-old boy need to speak to his mother? Because he was in his life review, and she was suffering so deeply that he could not ascend into the light until she found some measure of peace, which is a big ask, in my humble opinion, of a mother. Big ask, big ask. I speak to parents all day long who have lost their children. I really think that's the big one. And there it was, Mom, I'm okay. I'm with so-and-so, whoever it was, I don't remember anymore. And whatever he shared to her helped untether him to the earth plane so that she could move forward and he could ascend into the light. So our life review, what I've since learned, if there's a difference between what is the common typical medium out there in the world, which is considered what we call evidential mediums, the famous ones that are out there, those are evidential mediums. Evidential mediums focus on the evidence. That's their job, to help you know that life is eternal. That's what they're here to do, to help break that veil down, to help open our hearts to that. Shamanic medium, chills. I get chills when I get validations. I should have mentioned that before. And I say it all the time. And when it'll probably be on my tombstone. Now I really have the chills, It's like, here's your, all right. So, what was I saying? I just lost my train of thought. Oh my gosh. Shamanic medium. One of the things that I'm noticing that I do is I connect the spirit that's in life review with the living to help correct karma. So if they have in any way created some measure of suffering and are aware that they have created that suffering, they often come through me or the people I train. There's quite a few people here. There's one right there. I see her, Shannon. There's that can connect with that soul and bring through a message of healing that liberates the soul and the living. Right? It takes them out of that state. All of a sudden, what I notice is it's like, oh my God, I had no idea how my alcoholism affected you. I had no idea that when I thought I was working 60, 70 hours a week and I was trying to be such a good father, that it made you also feel all alone. Right? So there's an awareness that happens that allows that soul to come in and share an insight that they could not have, they didn't get while they were in the body. That's not the only reason they come in. but it seems to be the primary reason, is to create some kind of correction, some kind of healing, because it liberates them. It allows them to move past that life review, and it liberates you. It liberates us. It allows us to move further along our own path too, to integrate whatever healing or lesson we might need in that experience as well. And so life review can go on, and it's not always linear. It's not like you go into life review, you sit in a room until you get it, you know. You can also go to other stations in the Akashic realm where you just indulge in the reunion, where you sort of you suspend some time from that review, or you can have your own version of heaven. Now, once you get through the life review itself, you then move to a next stage, and that next stage is like what we kind of call heaven. But everybody's heaven's their own version of heaven. And if you think of it like, has anybody here ever seen Star Trek or Next Generations? You know that, what's the room? Yeah, the holodeck. It's like a holodeck. It's like you go in and you get to play what gives you the greatest bliss. So a lot of time, like when I talk to my dad, it always fascinates me. My dad's like, just shot my best golf game ever. I'm like, you're in the afterlife and you're playing golf? Really? Like, yeah, that's bliss for him. Chills. That's a version of heaven. And what's so cool about it is that he can do it with my brother. And my brother was sick for so long, most of his adult life, that they couldn't play golf together. So he's usually will tell me, yeah, Scott and I play golf. So like, it's a version of their heaven. Sorry. This is such a sap. So it's also, you know, I'll see people who love to fish tell me, yeah, I'm on my boat. I'm fishing. Some people are just in their garden. They're in nature. Some people are playing cards with their sisters because that to them is a heaven, right? It's that juicy, you know, what we call the everyday life. That's really the juice, the spice, the meaning of life, right? When you really reflect on what's special, it's those moments of connection, those exquisite places we visited, but it's really about who we are with and how we are with them, right? That creates that kind of heaven-like experience for people. And so that phase can last a very long time. It can last generations. For some, it can last thousands of years. Not all souls just return. Some people stay in that stage. Not everybody creates a heaven like that either. You can go and do research. So you can ascend past review, kind of create that blissed out state, that really cool holodeck experience. Or you can serve as an ascended being, not a master. Don't misunderstand me. When I say ascended, the soul then reunites, takes everything that it learned, everything that it understands through that review, and it uploads it like to the cloud. But the cloud is your higher self, your oversoul. And so that oversoul, that larger soul. So here's what's interesting. When we incarnate, when we come in, our soul is massive. Only a small aspect of the soul comes into the body. Most of the soul stays outside the body and exists in this multidimensional state, completely communed with God, completely aware of itself as light. It's only the small fractal that's inside us that forgets or has to kind of search for it. So when you pass, you start to reunite with that essence and you upload that data, if you will, just to use a language that makes sense of our times, right? In our times. So you're integrating that information into that aspect of your being But then you also take it to the higher cloud. So you take that data up into your higher self, into the larger soul. And then, and different spiritual, the theosophy may have a term for that, right? And pranic has a term for that. But it doesn't matter what the language is. It's that there is a larger soul. That's you. And you upload that information into that and integrate it into your soul self. And then you decide what you're going to do with it. But you don't usually decide what you're going to do with it right away. And then you take that information to the next step, which is your soul group. And that gets integrated into the soul group. And then that information merges up with what we call divine consciousness or the light. So once you go through that process, I have met souls. One of the most fascinating, I met a couple. I'm thinking about one in particular who was an atheist. It was very fascinating. He was an atheist, and he was a famous atheist. He started a movement. And I'm just trying to ask for permission how much I can reveal about that. I got that. I can share it. So he started the humanistic movement of Judaism. And he was world renowned. Chills. Oh, this is just going to shake some shit up. Here you go. Because he came to me after he passed and asked me to go and tell the rabbis that he had passed, the other rabbis in the congregation, and share a message, which I did. And then someone who was very close to him came to me and shared. And the thing that I'm going to share, which is the part that I have permission to share with, is that he was telling me that he was spending his afterlife still learning. And he was probably one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. Just an intellectual genius, and I don't use that phrase lightly. Just brilliant human being. And he was still learning. He was fascinated by what he was learning in the afterlife. And he was showing me these libraries and how much he could. Val would just love it. If anybody knows Val back there, she would love it. She just can't get enough information. That's how he was. And he was learning. And he also told me that he was working with a band of other beings to help wake up the earth, to help humanity awaken. Chills. That he felt that that was his duty to do that. There was no, even though he said to me, and he did say it to me, and I'm going to share it. He said, Lori, yep, there is a God. It's nothing like you thought, though. Okay, cool. And he just gave me the sense of his experience that for him, God was the expansiveness, the omnipresent love of the universe. That is the feeling that I had from him. Now, I have had the privilege of serving people from so many different religious backgrounds. I have met people that are telling me that they're sitting with Jesus at the feet of Jesus, they're in the arms of the Blessed Mother. I have had people come to me who are Hindu telling me that they're with Krishna or Vishnu. I've had people that are Muslim telling me that they're with the great prophet or that they see Allah. So I've had from all different religions, Buddhists and Sikhs, and it just fascinates me that this holodeck, as I understand it, allows you to experience the divine in the way that you understand it and can receive it. Does that make sense? So if Jesus is your guy, Jesus is going to be your guy, right? You're going to feel that connection, that love, that enveloping of that exquisiteness until you merge into that which is even greater than that form, if that makes sense. I say it like that. So you ascend beyond that, including that and beyond that. So it's all inclusive, if that makes sense. Does that make sense when I say it like that? Yeah. Okay. I don't know why I make notes. I do it so I have some idea of their mantra. There is also the opportunity to serve people. There are some people who hit that life review phase, and instead of going up to that next higher level,
they choose to spend a certain amount of time helping the earth. So they become like what we call guides or helpers. Some become teachers. And I remember this young boy that died very tragically. He was 18. And it was tragic. But he was using his afterlife that amount of time that he was telling me about, escorting children that died suddenly and didn't know how to get to the light. He was helping them find their way. That was something that he was eager and willing and wanting to do because that's what he felt when he passed. So he was bringing that service. Does that make sense? So, and sometimes, how many of you have felt like your loved one was helping you in life? Yeah, right? You have chills, right? So they help you because they can. They've been given permission to. So if they've been given permission to, they get an assignment. And for me, the way that a guy, like a loved one, shows up and tells me if they're one of your helpers is they place their hand on your shoulder. That's just a sign for me to let me know they're helping, they're guiding. They can't interfere with your free will. They're not suddenly, omnipresent. And a lot of people think like they know everything my dad knows. No. They have a lot more awareness, a lot more light, and they're much wiser because of their perspective, but they don't know everything. And they can't suddenly fix your life. And, if they can, and my dad does it for me, I'll let you know. I'll give you the formula. But they certainly will give you tips and clues and help you stay on that right path. Right? So, and then ultimately, finally, you go to this place where you lose interest in the earth plane altogether. What we would refer to as reunion with the divine, or the source light, or God, however you experience that ultimate creative source of all that is. You merge with that light, and you no longer identify with yourself as the person that you were. You just experience yourself as one with that light. That oneness is always there. That's with you now. You have the capacity that's always existing behind the mind, right behind the story. That awareness of your unification with that love, with that light. That's ever present because it's who you are. It can never disappear. It can't be squashed out of you. You can feel like it is. I've certainly been there. But it's never really gone ever. You can just lose touch with it. It's just always present. And so the higher you go through this process, the clearer that becomes. And then eventually you just lose interest in the earth plane and you rarely make contact with it. And it's just not your point of focus any longer. And this is when a soul does this, they may then choose never to return. They merge into what some call nirvana, bliss, the exquisiteness of the formlessness, and they stay in that space. And then they can still serve and help the earth plane, but they'll do it as a light being, not really in form. They won't be identified as a loved one anymore. You'll just feel that presence as love in your life, or as light. That happens to many. And then there's others that choose to come back. And they decide that they're going to take everything that they've learned in their body and everything that they're learning in their afterlife. They're going to roll it into a program. They're going to create a blueprint. They're going to decide that they're going to come back and they're going to decide what they want to learn, what they want to master, how they want to serve, how they want to show up. And they're going to pick the form that they're going to take. You know, it could be cute blonde. It could be Caucasian. It could be
African American, it could be Hindu, it could be, Native American, whatever form it is. It's just because you decided that's the form for you at that time that's going to serve your evolution. And then you pick a game that you're going to play. You pick a family, you pick a storyline. Yeah, the face, that was fantastic. Sorry, I did not mean to. It's like, wait, I picked that? Right? Isn't it shocking? I'm not saying that's fact. I'm telling you this based on what I've understood so far. It looks like we pick it. I mean, obviously, I've had a few conversations about that. And there's times I'm like, really? I chose this? So, but it does look like we do that. And then we decide when we're going to come in. And we return and we take on a new life. And we may remember our past life. We may remember it if it's going to help us, if it's going to serve our process. So when I was a little girl, right, Sandy said that comment that I made to, and I was like 7, 8 years old. I mean, there was no ego around that. I just knew that I had returned. And I remembered that in my last life, and I remember telling my parents that I had led an ashram. That I was a male. The chills, I devoted my life to spiritual life, and I remembered it. Like as vivid as anything. And I was like, how come I had dark skin? Like, what's the deal? I remember saying that to my parents, like, this is really light. And I'm a chick, like, what's going on? Yeah. So I remember having that feeling of what is, really feeling curious about it. It was visceral for me. I didn't have access. Nobody was talking. Remember, I grew up with scientists, humanists. They didn't talk about an afterlife or reincarnations. No belief in my home. This was just my own experience of it. I didn't know what it was. I had no language for it. I remember going to France when I was a teenager, walking into a Catholic church and having chills from head to toe, and I started to cry. And I was like, I was a nun here. And I'm with 16-year-olds. You're like, you are the weirdest person ever, Lori. I was like, yes, I know. But I was totally a nun here, man. I really was. Right, so my daughter likes to say, are you high, Mom? No, you get all this natural. Right, so we do come back. So that's the fundamental process. And why do we come back? We come back because we're here to integrate it and learn. And I would say it this way. So far, this seems to be my understanding. It seems that divine consciousness is curious. If I hide myself in this form, will you discover me? If I put myself in this story, will you return to love? Chills. How about if I do it this way, with this much pain or this much, in the way, will you find me again? Will you remember me? Will you return to me? It seems to me that the divine consciousness is evolving through every imaginable context possible in our human form, and that we are participating in that. We are part of that. And when we wake up to it, we don't feel like a victim to it any longer. We now know, this isn't happening to me. This is me awakening. This is me learning how to be a master of this light in this body. Does that make sense when I say it like that? It shifts the whole perspective. And for me, that was an important lesson to learn, an awareness for me to grasp. So I describe the afterlife, and I did not describe that it doesn't always go that way.
There's a few times when it doesn't, because there are deaths that we would call not such a good death, right? So there's untimely deaths. Doesn't seem like that's possible, but there are. There are people that are taken out too soon, or taken out by shock, or taken out by a helicopter crash. That just probably shouldn't have happened, right? And you can say that it's in divine order, but if you tune in, you may or may not find that that's true. And so those spirits don't immediately see their loved ones in spirit. They don't immediately begin the ascension process because they don't even know where they are. They don't know why they're not in the body. I've had a spirit tell me, why can't anybody hear me? I don't understand. I'm standing right next to my wife and I don't understand. She can't hear me. And I have to be the one to say it's because you're not in your body anymore. And now it's time to go to the light. And so that is shaman. There are shaman and others that escort souls into the light. Those are, shaman type people who do that. Practice are called psychopomps. It's a Greek word and it means escorting a spirit into the light. And so what you do is you engage with them in a way to help them feel safe because they think they're still alive, and you help them make peace. There's another time that can happen too. Two other types. And one is if there's tragedy, trauma at the time of death, and the soul fragments. And that process creates soul loss or fragmentation. And so some of the soul goes to the light and some remains like as an imprinted energy. We know what that's like. I would imagine that everybody here who has ever stepped into a place where there was mass death, a war, suffering, has felt it. Like imagine like if you've gone to Auschwitz or something like that. You may. There's a place out in Clarkston that I remember stepping in. I was like, oh my gosh, there was a whole battle here. Like a slaughter. You could feel it. Because it's the imprinted energy of the souls that have not been healed. They're still fragmented and they're staying in the astral realm. They're staying in the lower astral or the earth plane. So they just need help. They're not bad. They're not dark. Most of them are wanting to get to the light and they can be helped. There's plenty of angels, there's divine beings in spirit who will help them. But they don't always see them. They see the physical better than they see non-physical at that stage. So that's why they would find somebody like me or, it's funny, like Ivy, Shannon. I'm looking at the people that I know that also do this. They're in this room. So, so those people deserve help. Those spirits deserve help. When they get it, they go right into the light and they go through that process just like I described it. There are those spirits that don't want to go into the light, that avoid the light, that movies are made about. We call them ghosts, right? And notice I don't use the word ghost, I use the word spirit, because a spirit is somebody that's in the light or in that process of being in the light, reunion with that light. Ghost is a fragment of that soul that is choosing to stay in the earth plane and does not want to go to the light. They are attached to their house or their loved one. They feel they're afraid of judgment. Their religion might have made them afraid. They just won't go and they linger. And there are people that, call those places haunted. And they get, some people get really into that. I'm not like, I feel spirit enough. Like, but they linger and they can be helped too. But they're a little bit of a harder nut to crack because they're, like the other ones want to go. They just don't know what's happening. They don't want to go. Has anybody ever seen the movie The Others? Okay, well, I just gave it away, so don't see it. It's probably the best movie I've ever seen. It's not like a great movie or anything. I'm not like referencing it, but it's an important understanding of what that movie really tells it's a good demonstration of what happens when souls do not want to ascend. Okay, so I think I shared everything about that. Just want to make sure I've gotten all that. I just want to say a couple of other things. Spirit seems to want us to learn from them. So they come to mediums not just for that karmic correction, right? Or to let you know that life is eternal.
they want you to know some things. And right before I was leaving my house, I heard, "You didn't even put this in your talk, Lori." So I was like, okay. And I wrote down, and what I heard was, talk about what we care about. And that is, you can do your life review here and now. You can live your life consciously now.
You don't have to wait to do life review when you pass.
You can be examining, noticing, compassionately observing yourself here and now, lovingly, willingly taking inventory, if you will, right? And just checking in with yourself. How am I doing? Do I love myself? Am I loving? Another thing that I hear from Spirit all the time is live your life to the fullest. Go for the thing you're afraid of. Whatever it is you're afraid of, that's where your power lies. It lies there. I am afraid of public speaking. Like it's a freak, right? And every time I get asked, I say yes. Like, that's crazy. Right?
Because your power lies where you're afraid. I get nervous, like you wouldn't believe it. I look like I'm sweating.
And I like got shakes, and then the whole day, I saw Bisma, my friend who's back there today, and she's like, "Oh, I'm coming tonight." I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm so nervous. Why did I do this?" And then I thought, that's not the right. You should be saying thank you for coming. A little cuckoo over here, right? So what's the point of what I'm saying is to go for it. Go for the thing that frightens you. Go for the thing that you think, gosh, if I only had this, I would do that. Don't wait for the right circumstances. Do it. Pretty much everybody I've ever talked to is so grateful. No one I've ever met on the other side has said, "I'm so glad I spent all that time working." No one. They don't say work harder. They say live and love more. Love more. Love yourself. Love the divine. Love one another. Love life. That is really what it's about. Oh, let me see if I can read the rest of what I wrote. Oh, have fun. Have fun. This place is meant to be enjoyed. We came into the material world to experience a sensory connection with life. So we're meant to indulge those senses and enjoy it. It gets to be fun. It doesn't have to be like all serious. We can laugh. We can play. We're meant to do that. Give yourself permission to have fun and do it. And one of the things I'm hearing that Spirit is telling me right now is be willing to go to the edge of your comfort zone and trust that you are completely always supported and going even further. And I'm not talking about danger. I'm talking about the edge of what you think you can possibly do or give yourself or have. And trust that the divine will support you. You see, you are set up for success. You are set up for success. And only your ego and story tells you otherwise. So your soul always knows the map. It knows the resources. It's got the way, and it will bring you to it when you get out of the way. Right? And that's the whole practice. Right? And then another thing they want me to say is to wake up to your intuition. It's vital at this time on the planet. We like to call it woo-woo. And I get it. We're in an age still where we believe that the only thing that's real is what we can touch and measure and prove scientifically. But you're here at the Theosophical Society, so I'm guessing you're pretty much open to that which you can't measure and necessarily prove, but know to be true. You know it in your bones. You know it in your being. And so your intuition is your internal GPS. It's that gift that's been given to all of us, everyone. I'm not better than anybody else. I just honed mine. I've just worked on it, and I still work on it. I'm going to be a student till I pass, probably, and then when I'm done. And I go up there, and then I'll come back and do another talk. Maybe I won't be so nervous. So that intuition is key because it bridges us to non-ordinary reality. It bridges us to the infinite. It bridges us to that which is greater than ourselves. And it always tells us the truth. It doesn't appease the ego. And it leads us to our liberation. So with that, I'm going to say thank you.